prison, there are walls within walls. The wall the state builds around a man, and the walls a man builds around himself. This is Jim Britt. For the past 2 years, number A56736, San Quentin Prison. In 3 days, he goes before the parole board to plead his case for freedom. This is his story, the story of a prisoner. This is San Quentin, second largest prison in the United States, a 110-year-old Bastille, with its own factories, its own hospitals, its own churches, its own schools. A city of walls. I'm John Willis. Within these walls, there are over 5,000 prisoners, more than half of them between the ages of 24 and 29. This is a story about one of those young men, and about the grim and gray world to which he has been sentenced. A world in which every day begins like every other day. "6:30, the day begins. 24 years old, married with 2 children, Jim Britt is here on charges of forgery and theft, crimes committed to supply his narcotics habit. His term of sentence is 6 months to 14 years, an indeterminate sentence. His actual term is set at the discretion of the parole board. But as long as he stays, the rhythm of his days will seldom vary. "7 o'clock, out for breakfast. The men have no place in their cells to dispose of trash. Dropped over the sides, it's swept up later.
Washington, A75117. Report to the laundry.
Before work or classroom assignments start, the prisoners gather in the yard. Jim's closest friends are a group he calls the San Pedro Tip. Most of them are boys he grew up with. The gang that once hung out on the streets of San Pedro now meets daily in the yard at San Quentin.
A little later, will you?
All right, Jim. You can't see Nacho? He's got Gus hung up down on the handball court. Pepper and Bob just run over him the other day, you know.
Yeah.
Pepper plays handball pretty good, huh? No, man, it's just, he's a blank.
No,
He's
don't play no good.
well, he's a double blank.
Jimmy, you getting a visit this week?
Yeah, I should, man. Yeah, I got a letter.
Kids coming with her?
I don't know.
Your old lady coming out?
Yeah.
All this time?
Yeah.
Boy, that is cold.
Well,
What's it been? A long time now, huh? How long?
About 22 months.
22 months. 22 months. Did you bring the kids?
No, I don't think so, man, for the simple reason.
Surprise.
Well, big hassle. She'd probably have to come up on the bus. And,
It'd be nice seeing them.
yeah, I'd like to see him.
How many kids you got?
I got 2.
Is that?
Yeah, boy and a girl.
One of them.
How old are they?
Tripper's 3.5, and my little girl, Shelley's 2.5.
8 o'clock, the group breaks up. Each man goes to his assignment. Jim goes to class.
Mr.
In trouble since his teens, Jim never finished grammar school. He is now in the 8th grade. Jim studies English, math, and civics, and enjoys studying the Constitution.
Mr. Britt, there was one question here that most people tended to miss, and that was number 26, dealing with the elastic clause. You want to read it and see if you can explain it and give the answer?
The elastic clause in the Constitution gives Congress power to A, inflate currency, B, pass any law necessary to the operation of the government, C, write rubber checks, D, twist laws to suit their convenience. Well, I got B, pass any law necessary to the operation of the government.
B was the correct answer on this. Can you explain a little bit more? What is inflate currency? You know what that means? Can you inflate currency? You know what it means, Mr. Britt?
Oh, myself?
Yeah.
That means to, I don't know what it means.
The annual sports award banquet will be held tonight in the South Dining Hall.
Noon, 5,000 men line up in the big yard at San Quentin. Classes and factory assignments stop. Row after row, they get ready to march into lunch. But inside, the long gray tables of the prison movies have been replaced by a huge cafeteria where the men eat in groups of 4. After lunch, Jim has no job assignment. San Quentin is a crowded prison. There aren't enough jobs to go around. The rest of the day is his own.
I like jazz. Every place I am, man, where there's music, I'm listening to music. Now, you look at me out on the yard, and you think that I found a home. I laugh, and I never do hard time, but I never show that I'm doing hard time. You know, it would just make it all the harder on myself. I got this time to do it, I'm going to do it the easiest way I can.
Each day is like every other day, except when there's a visitor. This is Jim's 19-year-old wife, Lanny. Jim has been in prison for 3 of the 6 years they've been married. She visits rarely. The 450-mile trip from San Pedro is too expensive. The first thing they talk about are the children, Shelley and Tripper, and how much they've changed in the time Jim has been in prison.
Shelley, every place Tripper goes, Shelley's right behind him.
Probably, well, yeah. Well, you know, maybe it's been Shelley was just in the cradle when I got her.
She was 2 months old.
Yeah.
Tripper just turned a year old.
Yeah.
You really like him now compared to just a year ago.
No, I liked him then.
Because
I don't know him, though.
he knows how to talk now. He's always running after other kids, you know, to play with him, or the kids are chasing after him. They're playing hide-and-go-seek, or Shelley's always chasing after him, too. And they've grown big. Tripper's the size of a 5-year-old now.
Yeah, you're gonna have to
Shelley's
send me
almost
some
the size of him.
You're gonna have to send me some pictures.
I'll send you some in about a week.
Then they talk about the possibility of a parole, about his fears and doubts of making it on the outside.
Some guys make it quick, but if they say, well, we denied you because you weren't rehabilitated, I'd be kind of bitter then. If they say to me, well, you owe more time, well then okay, I owe them more time, you know. It's gonna be a hard pull. Because there isn't a doubt in my mind that there'll be times out there when I'll want to fix.
That's why me and the kids step in.
Well, right. Somebody has to step in. Because, I'm trying to be just as honest as I can. And there is no doubt in my mind that people can come up to me and say, Jim, let's go fix. And that I can say, well, you know what, fellas, that's not me anymore, you know. But there's going to be times where they're going to catch me just right. And I'm going to need something awful strong here.
For a brief moment, Jim Britt was a man with a family. A man feels the loneliness of prison when he is forced to leave those he loves. It's 4 o'clock, lockup time. And once again, Jim Britt is reminded he is only a number. Every prisoner returns to his cell to be counted. No man leaves unless the tally checks. Another day passes, and now there's another long night in which to think. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after, unless the parole board feels that he's ready. An important part of Jim's prison life is the time he spends in San Quentin's gym. He has gained not only 35 pounds, but a new outlook on himself.
I know that the impurity complex behind your body, your physique, played a pretty big part in my becoming addicted. Because when I was under the influence of heroin, there was no complexes, there was no feeling of impurity. I was just like anybody else, you know.
Drug addiction and the fear that he will return to it in the future is still Jim Britt's biggest problem. He comes to grip with this in group therapy sessions. Here, highly trained professional counselors meet weekly with small groups of prisoners. The men talk freely of their individual problems and help each other gain insight into the patterns that landed them in prison.
I started off, I didn't even think about it. The rest of the fellows were doing it. We graduated from drinking to smoking weed to shooting dope. You know? And when I found myself smoking weed and they're shooting dope and they told me how square I was, well, I just couldn't stand this rejection. And I wanted to be with that particular crowd.
Well, now, do you think that if you hadn't came up in this environment and came up in another environment, a more pleasing one, would you feel that you would be a user today?
Well, I can't say I wouldn't be a user, but I know definitely that my pattern would have been different.
Yeah.
Well, there's quite a few people, such as doctors and nurses. You know, they start out well-educated. They take 8 years to get a diploma or an MD. And there's quite a few of them right now in Fort Worth and Lexington, you know, the hospital.
Hook-leg dogs.
Yeah, hooks. But they come up in a good environment and
but they have families somewhere.
Jim doesn't say much, but sometimes one man's problem triggers another man's thinking. When Jim was 12, his parents moved from the Midwest to the outskirts of San Pedro, California. It was a good neighborhood. There were no money problems. His mother and father were the deacon and deaconess of the church. But Jim wound up in another environment.
It was just a jungle, you know. You could count on one hand the guys that didn't get loaded. Now, this wasn't on junk, this was on weed. See, it was the thing to do. There was always something going on, and if there wasn't, you made something. I was with some other people, and they says, well, let's go burglarize this store. And instead of walking this way and saying, no, I don't want to burglarize this store, Well, I had to be one of the fellas, and I went and burglarized a store, and I got caught. My parents punished me. I worked very hard to get a new bike. My dad chained it up. Not for a week or a month, until it rusted away.
Maybe it was the punishment. Maybe it was the neighborhood. Maybe it was the group. But after that, he was in constant trouble. In jail more than he was out. The last time he was arrested, it was on multiple charges. Thefts and forgeries he had committed to satisfy an expensive narcotics habit. Now he was at war with the world. In defense, he built a wall around himself.
The people that are against drug users, well, their feelings don't run in that...
Well, you know, mine is different. My case is different than his is for the simple reason that my people always, there was never any money problems in the house, you know. There was never, my parents were deacon and deaconess of the church, you know, and upstanding in the community and this and that. And now I could have been accepted, you know, in their group, but I rebelled. I never would listen to anybody. Somebody tell me something, I listen now. I might not take their advice, but I will listen.
In prison, all men wait. They pass their time in waiting. Waiting for the day they can return to the world outside. Finally, the day that comes only once a year is here for Jim Britt. The day he has a chance to go before the adult authority, the California Parole Board. Four men wait. Four men wonder. Some will be granted parole. Some will be denied. Before they'll be called in by the parole board, one by one, each man sits deep in his own thoughts.
Being here has given me time to think. I know my attitude has changed the last 2 years I've been in here. Like the things that used to be important to me then, they're not important to me anymore. It's going to be awful hard to prove to these people.
As Jim enters the room, he is aware a year in prison is at stake in the next hour's interview. The adult authority will want to know how he's doing in school, whether he's learned a trade, his attitude toward people. With Jim's past record at their fingertips, two highly trained interviewers, Mr. John Brewer and Mr. Cletus Fitzharris, begin the questioning.
As you think back over some of the things that happened when you were pretty young, do any things occur to you that might have helped you at that time that you didn't get? Any of the other adults that you were in contact with? Where did society miss the boat?
Well, I think it was me. I wouldn't at the time, up until even this last time that I was arrested, I wouldn't listen to anybody. I just wouldn't listen. I didn't want any help. I've been rebelling I've just been rebelling all my life.
And then you more or less devoted your life to the use of heroin after that, because you got it, as I understand it, up to about 3 grams. What is that in money?
Oh, for about $30.
And 7 days a week. And
Yes, sir.
how did you supply the habit?
Boosting cigarettes.
Stealing cigarettes from department stores and
Grocery
markets?
stores, markets. Mm-hmm.
So you have to steal an awful lot of cigarettes to supply a habit like that.
Yes.
Mr. Brewer, do you have any questions on the criminal end?
Well, the picture that we seem to get here, Mr. Britt, is that you started getting involved in some difficulties when you were pretty young, and that progressively they began to get worse and worse. The impressions that some of the law enforcement people had when you were out and just prior to your last arrest was that you were pretty heavily involved in narcotics traffic, that this had just about become essential to your being able to get your own supply of narcotics. I mean, were you actually involved in narcotics traffic, and to what extent?
My house was what you would call a shooting gallery. Just, I stayed home, and everybody that would come, you know, I had outfits in the house. People could sit in the house. They could fix, listen to the record player, just someplace to be, you know, home away from home. It was a shooting gallery. Mm-hmm. Just all comers. If you have any narcotics, well, come. If you don't come. Mm-hmm. So it was just...
Did you ever wonder if your wife was going to begin to use narcotics as a result of this kind of activity going on at your home?
No, because she despised it. We had a lot of arguments over this. You know, it was her home, and I was turning her home into a den, you know, and he was very much opposed to it.
Just one final question. If you were granted parole, do you think you could make it?
Yes, I feel I could.
Okay, Mr. Britt, we'll talk this over and you'll be notified what our decision is.
Okay, thank you. I feel now that any more time won't do me a bit of good. But if they do deny me, well, I won't be bitter, because I figure that they feel that I owe society that much more. I haven't given society enough time. But if they keep denying me, and I can't see why they're denying me, then I would be bitter. Naturally, I'd be bitter. This is my life.
Late that night, the verdict is delivered by a prison guard on his rounds. Jim Britt is denied. In prison, all men wait. And Jim Britt will have to wait another year. We'll be back in a moment with the story of a prisoner. Jim Britt's parole has been denied. But one day, Jim Britt will be free. Right now, he is a man behind walls. The wall the state built around him, the wall he built around himself. But Jim Britt is young, and the young can change. In prison, he has had time to think of the years he's wasted.
This whole penitentiary gets to be a way of life. I've got to straighten out my hand. I'm laying dead here. I fear a wasted life. I see enough of it out there.
Maybe he's starting to change. Maybe there's hope. Maybe his wall is starting to crumble.